Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddard. Very excited about today's episode, in which I have with me a serial entrepreneur and a financial professional that is actually host of Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. We're going to be talking about, as a real estate agent, how you can show up more as an advisor than just as a customer service representative or salesperson. So before I introduce today's guest officially, let me just remind you that you can get show notes and highlights, action steps by going to the website, thinkbigger.realestate. Sign up for our weekly update, as well as I've got a treat there for you when it comes to actually becoming more of an advisor. So today's topic fits in perfectly with that. And I want to thank Amanda Neely out of Chicago, Illinois, all the way from Chicago, coming on to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. Amanda, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for having me, Justin. I'm excited to be here. Yes, from one podcaster to another, it's a pleasure to have you on. So very cool. Now, I know you are a business owner. You've started everything from coffee shops to financial advisement businesses, and you're young. Like, I'm assuming you're young. That you just got great face cream or something. But I love the ambition. You know, I think sometimes people believe that they need to be in their late 50s before they can start getting after it. And you're kind of teaching the world otherwise, maybe kind of the millennial generation, I'm assuming. Yep. So I hear a happy birthday is in order for you. So happy birthday. Thank you. Yes. I'm an August baby myself too. I just turned 35. So just a little bit behind you, yes, I think. Yes. Well, thank you for that. And happy birthday. Thank you. Now, you've had your birthday, or you're going to have it this month? I had it. You had it. Well, I hope it was wonderful. Mine certainly was. Had a lot of people make me feel real special. Good. Very good. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast, Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. Just tell us kind of in a nutshell, what's that all about? What would people expect to hear if they went to find your show? Yeah. So a lot of times when people are thinking about their money, they are looking for what's the hottest, latest, most awesome product out there. Yeah. But we like to return back to time-tested, time-honored strategies. And in particular, the greatest generation, they came of age during the Great Recession or Depression, in the 30s and 40s, early 40s. And we have found that there's a lot to learn from how they structured their financial lives in this post-2008 kind of life that we live in now. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot more that's transferable than I think like what our parents would have used in the 80s and 90s. It is really interesting that with the internet, right, with podcasting, like there's a bajillion ideas, yet there are tried and true principles that when implemented and utilized over time, they have proven results, right? And there's a bunch of newer ideas that maybe don't have that same track record. So I love that you're kind of a voice for the millennial generation on these tried and true principles, right? These kind of North Stars of financial wealth. Yeah. Yeah. And real estate is a big component within there because owning your own property, whether it's something you live in or that you rent to others, is a great way to create wealth that's worked for thousands and thousands of years. Great point. And I love hearing you say that. I think sometimes financial professionals are seen as, antagonists to owning real estate, right? Because it takes away their investment opportunity. And what I hear you and your counterpart, Mark Willis, who's been on the show as well, mention is that real estate is actually a very critical component of everybody's wealth portfolio who is wealthy. Yep. Absolutely. And good thing you're speaking to an audience of real estate professionals today. So you're in good hands with a mentality and philosophy like that. Yeah. And, grandma would have different views of how to use your home in terms of, pay off your mortgage as quickly as you can, where you might say use that as leverage more or something like that. But the home as a source of where life happens and where life is stewarded and pushed forward is a great way to think about what a home can mean, not just in the wealth that it can create, but in the value that it brings to the lives of the people that are purchasing that home and are living in it. And that I think ties in really well with what we're going to kind of talk about today. I think, I love that you said that, because I think, the life of a real estate agent, I get the great privilege of being around them all day long. And it can be a bit of a grind at times, right? And I think when people can step back and say, wait a minute, I'm helping people find like their favorite place on earth, their safe place, the place where they have their oftentimes some of their greatest moments. I'm a believer that, the greatest work that we do oftentimes is within the walls of our own home. And that's not my own quote. I borrowed that one from a mentor. But I think that when real estate agents start to recognize just how powerful their role in the world is, maybe it helps them rise above kind of that, that grind. Let's talk a little bit about, because one of the things that you help people with when it comes to their financial life is helping them start with the end in mind, right? And I invite agents to listen to this through a couple different ears, right? This ear over here is going to be listening to it as for your own personal finances. The other ear is going to be listening to it as the questions that you can adopt that Amanda is going to share with us today, that you can begin asking your clients. Again, in order to rise above industry disruption, in order to rise above tech platforms that are discount brokers, to rise above iBuyers, you can't just have a flashier listing presentation. You actually have to provide more value. You have to provide more leadership. And so asking questions that get people to move and be influenced to make more and better decisions is critical. So I want you to teach us, Amanda, some of the questions that you have. We're going to keep today's show a little bit brief, but I'd like to have you teach us a little bit about what are some of the questions that agents should be asking themselves that they then could adopt to begin asking some of their clients to really, again, rise above kind of the commoditized level of where a real estate agent's value proposition has been.
Yeah. So it's really pretty simple. I like to go in a timeline kind of fashion where I start with, where are you at right now? Like, what are some of the things that are happening in your life that could have a major impact on your financial future? Or like, what is the home you're looking for right now in the case of a real estate agent? And you get the this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, whatever it might be. And but then also like sharing like, well, what are some of the biggest frustrations or concerns or things you think could go wrong that we want to make sure we avoid too. So then you get, like the bad school district or, that sort of thing. And then from there, I like to take one question about the past. Like, what did you learn from the adults that were in your life as a kid about money? Or, about what a home should be and how a home should function in the case of a real estate agent. And then start thinking about the future. And I like to start with the short-term future. What do you want to see over the next 5 years? But really end with the long-term future. Ask them like, what do you want to accomplish financially in life? When you are on your deathbed, what do you want to look back and have done? Or what do you want to be leaving? What do you want that to look like? And really, like, sometimes it's hard for people to get into that. There's some people that love thinking long term and other people that are living the day to day, just thinking, the shorter term. And so I sometimes have to ask that question a few different ways to get them to think longer term like that. And even then, they might say, well, I want to leave a legacy to my kids or, something like that. Well, any bucket list items for you in the meantime, things that you want to do. So I was thinking about this for myself. I'm about to purchase a property and I was thinking, I know where I want to live, but I was realizing I need to be thinking about like, what's beyond that? Do I plan to live there for 30 years? Do I plan to sell it in 5 to 10 years so I can be in a better school district for my son? Do I want to rent it out instead of selling it? And I was thinking I want to define some of those longer term goals for myself before I'd actually like meet with a real estate agent. But then if I was meeting with someone, I'd want them to be asking those kind of questions. And if I want flexibility, like to be able to make those decisions later, I'd want them to know that too. So that's not something you see in an app, that's not something, those aren't factors that can be factored in with just technology, but to have that kind of conversation, I think could be really interesting. I know it works gangbusters for me. And the big thing, not just the data gathering, not just recording their goals, but types of questions is what establishes the relationship and builds the trust. They know I care more about the transaction than just getting the numbers and making the sale. Finding out what they want and giving it to them that's what I do. Like I find out what they want and I give it to them, but not just what they want now, what they want later, and like balancing those things together, if that makes sense.
It's a super powerful concept. again, the tendency within, the real estate world is to become transactional. And I think that's very much what this new kind of breed of technology offerings is. It's very much how fast can we get the client into the home and get the deal closed and capture a margin or a profit off that. And I think where real estate agents really start to stand out is where they take their time. And this doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, the questions you just asked, a few minutes, but to simply ask the question of, what are your 5-year goals? What are your long-term goals? And how does the purchase of this property help you get there? Like, just asking that question, causing the client to think. You don't need to have the answers for them, but asking those questions, like you said, shows a couple of things. Number one, I care about you, right? And the advice that I'm going to give you is going to be predicated based on the response that you give me. That there's a couple different paths depending upon where you want to end up. And again, it moves the client to possibly even have conversations and ask themselves questions that no one's ever asked them before. Right. And that's a powerful thing.
Yep, absolutely. And it not only helps them with what you're trying to do, sell them a home, or in my case, set them up with a financial strategy, but it helps them, especially if you're working with a couple. They might hear things from each other that they've never talked about before, or they might continue that conversation later and get more in depth with it and make decisions that have nothing to do with the transaction that you're doing, because they're starting to think bigger. They're starting to think more long-term. It just opens their minds to all kinds of possibilities.
Well, honestly, that's part of the theme of this show, right? Is that as you so properly coined there, is that when people start to realize that real estate can be very much a means to get to the end that they really want, right? And I think some people see it as in and of this, like it's an end in and of itself. And I think that's short-sighted, but to be able to see that real estate is such a powerful tool, both the business as well as the actual, the ownership of real estate, can help propel you to get to the goals and fund the things that you want and aspire to have in life. And I think it does hopefully cause people to think bigger about real estate, to have to realize just how powerful it can be. And on the consumer end, to realize, like, you know what, if it really has the power to do that, I probably ought to be asking questions, and I probably ought to be hiring somebody that asks me those questions, as opposed to just going to an app and kind of like an Amazon shopping cart and choosing something out of there. But really, what am I trying to accomplish both in my home life as well as in my investment long-term legacy life? And real estate has the ability to and plays a critical part in both of those.
Yeah. And the caveat here is that when you ask these questions, if what you would typically do doesn't fit with their goals, you have to be willing to sacrifice the sale and say the words, the goals that you shared with me, I don't think it's the right time to buy a home. Or I think you would want to buy a home that's a lot less expensive than what you're thinking about, or something along those lines. I just had to do that this past weekend. I was talking with a real estate investor who's planning to buy a whole bunch of property over the next few years. And I had to say to them, the strategy that I would typically do, this whole idea of becoming your own banker, if you want as much of your money available as possible to purchase properties at auction or, different things, you shouldn't tie up any funds, so we're going to explore other things, but the thing you're interested in that you came to me with, I don't think we should do that. And they were really grateful that I was willing to say, I'm not going to sell you this product because it doesn't fit your goals.
Yeah. Well, that's where, a real estate agent agrees to be a fiduciary, right? Which is to act in the best interest of the client. I think sometimes agents see that through the limited perspective of to make the right buying decision. And I would argue that sometimes being a fiduciary entails telling them to make no decision, right? It's not time to sell. It's not time to buy. Based on what you told me you want to accomplish, here's my advice. And having an abundant enough mentality to be able to say, and I'm okay with that, because there's other clients out there. If I treat people as a fiduciary, putting their best interest in mind, there is going to be somebody out there that needs my services to buy or sell. And it may not be this person, but there's countless other people out there that are looking for someone that they can entirely trust.
Right. And because you've taken it beyond the transaction, you actually have gotten to know their goals in a deeper level. That might happen more frequently, but at least in my experience, you get the sale more often too. And so it counterbalances either way.
Absolutely. I really appreciate what you've shared here, and again, in helping us to think a little bit more like advisors. We're unfortunately we're out of time, so we'll have to circle back and do this again, because you've got tons of wisdom, and I think you're really a great voice again for the millennial generation, which again is being pulled in a number of different directions as to if real estate should be in their portfolio, if so, what it should look like. And to go back to those tried and true principles is super valuable. I'd like to end with this question, which is the signature question of the show, Amanda, which is, what does Amanda Neely do on a regular basis to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your own possibilities? If you teach us that, we'd be grateful.
Yeah. So I'm in business with my husband, and we have a set block of time on Friday afternoons to just dream. We call it our powwow time. And we just get together and we think long term, what do we want to be doing? How are we getting there now? Let's just brainstorm, throw things into a Google Doc, play around with things. And we do that on a consistent basis almost every week. Every once in a while we skip, but that's been really valuable for us to keep dreaming, keep thinking bigger, but also connecting in a different way than we connect throughout the week, where we're thinking about the here and now all the time.
So powerful, Amanda. I've never heard that answer, and I love it. I'm going to have a conversation with my wife today. We need to start implementing something similar. So that's, I love that. In fact, we were once at a Brian Buffini event, who's kind of a big real estate coach, and he taught us to dreamcast, which is a very similar process. And my wife oftentimes uses that term, and she'll be like, I'm dreamcasting. So I think it's probably already in our DNA a little bit to want to do that together. So thank you for that great tip. And again, thank you for your contributions to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. On kind of speaking on behalf of the audience, we're grateful for you and what you've shared. And my final request to everybody listening today is very simple. It's 3 short words you hear me say all the time, which are go, think bigger. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your time and for all you contributed. And we will talk again soon.